Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, December 16th, 2019. It is now 6 p.m. And I would invite you to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Larry, can you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, can we please have a roll call?
Rice?
Here.
Watsu?
Here.
Ashman, we're waiting on. George?
Here.
Hayden?
Here.
Robinson?
Here.
Skornica? Here.
Thank you. Entertain a motion for an approval of the agenda, please.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion by Councilman Skornica, supported by Councilman Butsu. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And next up, we will have our board comment. So, anyone? Anyone?
To start, like with our committees and things, you mean? or
No,
what?
for the zoning board.
Oh,
for-
that's, I'm in the wrong meeting. Sorry.
Comments other than the
Right,
agenda items?
or comments on anything to come before they've spoken to us.
Oh, I see.
I have nothing.
Okay, nothing. Item number 6 will be our unfinished business. And first up is appeal number 19-002,
Oh.
and that would be 186 Ball Street.
Good evening, guys.
Good evening, thank you for coming.
Thanks. So I guess we're back here. Last time I saw a photo you guys had, I think this is a better representation of the photo of the fence. So just kind of put this on display for everybody to talk about, please. Cool. Is there anything else we need to talk about it?
Well, now is your chance to go ahead and share your comments, thoughts, and ideas with
Yeah,
us.
yeah. I mean, again, I'm reiterating, I followed all the rules in the fence ordinances that I got. And again, I was citationed on a piece of paper saying that it was for something else. And then I wanted to appeal that, and they said I need to move it back 20 feet to a 20-foot setback line, which would push my fence pretty far in, which is great, but I don't want to do that. And I think that would cost quite a bit of money to do, and we've already discussed on how much that would cost, plus the time wasted that I lost last time I was here. Here's another fence that's right in the village here. That's a 6-foot privacy fence, not on a 20-foot setback line either. You know, so I'm just doing what I thought was right on the fence. And you know, I was told I was here because somebody complained. Last time we were here, a lot of people were here in support, and the person that complained was not here. So I don't know what else to do.
Could you show that other picture?
Sure.
Where is that at?
I believe that's
Mill.
for church.
Yeah, right at Mill and Church.
Yes, ma'am.
There was
Yes.
an older fence there too prior to it, and it was the exact same. It was also 6 foot, but it was like falling down.
And
But it was on the same.
I'm not trying to,
And that's fine, in a couple of minutes, we'll get a chance to address that.
Sure.
We just want to give you a chance first, and then
Sure.
we're more than able to
Yeah.
answer that one for you. But like I said, go ahead and just, anything you want to share with us,
No, I
please do
mean,
before we kind of
it's
give you
just, I
feedback.
got, I talked with my contractor, he said, it's, without a permit, you've already done the thing, you made the phone calls to the village, you asked the questions, what else can you do? I mean, these guys should have required a permit, so you guys should have done that for me. I would have gladly paid for that, so I don't know what else to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else you'd like to add? Anybody? I don't want to cut you off.
I don't know what we've already said.
That's
I
fine.
don't know what else there is to add.
Okay.
All right. And then next up will be the questions from our board members, and we can start down on Colleen's side and work our way down.
I don't have any questions right at this
Yeah.
time.
I do have a question as far as, I thought that we also sent it to planning commission, and so their feedback was approval, right?
Their feedback that, yeah, they were to evaluate whether it was in compliance or not, and their feedback was, obviously, it was not in compliance. Bill was also at the meeting, and Bill had a discussion with Planning Commission. It is not Planning Commission's job per se to give an opinion. It's to evaluate whether it's factual and the information's correct, which it is. So they feed it back to us for the zoning board. But yes, they were in, parallel with everything.
Well, because of the fact that how we handle, like fences and stuff like that, we don't require like permits and all that. Is that their recommendation that we start requesting, or, requiring permits to be?
That wasn't discussed
Yeah, I
at the
don't think that
meeting.
was a question.
In essence, what the planning commission said to the board is that they had reviewed the remarks that Bill Denon had made and given to the board with his analysis, and they agreed with it.
We found his being planning commission representative on council, I would say that at the discussion, what we did is we determined that Bill's assessment of the fence being in compliance or not in compliance was consistent with our existing ordinances. We did have a further finding that the existing ordinances are not easy or real clear on this topic, and there was a recommendation that the existing ordinances should be reviewed in the future. But that's not directly bearing on this, it's just another finding that we had after reviewing it.
Well, I remember this from last time they were here, and that is, as far as, there was, and according to what I understand, Bill has also said that there was definitely room for confusion as far as, falling within certain requirements, zoning requirements, so. Okay, that's all I had.
I would like to just quickly address the Church Street photo.
Sure.
I know it gets even more confusing. That's a different zone. That is zoned business.
Okay,
It's
no
not zoned
problem.
residential.
Yeah, no
And
problem.
that would be the reason.
No problem.
It was brought to our attention, it was verified. Bill did ensure it is a business district versus a residential.
Okay.
So unfortunately, it's not exactly the same thing.
I don't understand, I thought that was somebody's home right there at the corner.
It is zoned, that lot is zoned commercial, as is the empty lot next to it.
It's an
yes.
existing non-conforming use of the property. However, fences located there will be treated as any other fence would be treated within the commercial or what it's zoned for. In other words, an existing non-conforming use is kind of a strange thing in that you have zoning for properties, but you have uses on those properties. If those uses predate the zoning ordinance, then it's what would be considered an existing non-conforming use. So that house can be there, but if something happens to that house without special approvals, it could never be rebuilt there because that property is zoned in the D part or the downtown district. We have numerous properties around town that the uses of the property aren't really what the property is zoned for. And the zoning is for what we envision in the future, not what exists today. So there's a number of properties that get caught up in that, not just in the village, but in almost every community. So that's a little background on that.
Thank you. Would you like to go ahead, Larry?
I did notice that the gate on there, because I happen to live down at the end of the street where I see.
Yeah, I know
right
you
down
live
that
there.
way, and I noticed that the gate opens out over the sidewalk.
Sure.
I noticed that because one day I saw that it was open and it was completely obstructing the sidewalk in the open position.
For how long was it completely blocking?
Well,
When we mowed the lawn.
I also see they
For
have
3 seconds.
ways to secure it in the open position.
Sure.
But since the fence is already right at the concrete,
Few
anything-
inches off, yes, sir.
it's not. I've walked and looked very closely at that. That fence is right at the edge. The concrete's here and the fence starts
Sure.
immediately.
Right on my property line, yes, sir.
Yeah, and according to the maps, it looks like it's contiguous with the property line, from what I can tell. I mean, I can't tell exactly. But I mean, anything that then, just opening that fence and securing in the open position also would be over the sidewalk.
So your issue is with it opening, if it stayed closed?
I was just wondering why the choice to open outward where it could potentially obstruct
I
the
think that was a
sidewalk instead of
contractor
inward.
call on the way that, the distance that I really wanted to have it opened. That was the best call he made, so.
Okay,
yeah,
could it
I'm
be
not-
reversed to open inward instead?
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
We just flip the
Okay.
hinges.
Yeah.
We really
Yeah.
don't have it open other than when we pull the lawnmower in to cut the grass, but, I mean,
Okay.
the reason that we have this secure on there is so that it can't move farther into the sidewalk to obstruct it anymore, so we wanted it to be flush. That's why we have the locks on there, because we put those on there to secure it. So, yeah, I mean, if that's what we needed to do, then of course we would do that. I mean, the issue is, in order to move the fence, there's a huge tree there, so the root system would have to be pulled up and all of that to bring it back 20 feet. So that, I mean, whatever we potentially could do, I mean, we're willing to work with you guys. Our understanding was obviously that there wasn't any, restrictions for it, and that we could put it on our property line. So we did, but, I mean, if that's what we needed to do, then of course we would do whatever, but didn't realize
And is there any point short of that 20-foot where there is a clear line to put the fence without having to disturb trees?
I mean, we have to figure that out, because, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with how big those trees are. They've been there for years. I mean, my dad owned the property for 15 years before we built a house on it, so, I mean, they've been there for some time. They're huge, so I can only imagine how large the root system is. I mean,
Yeah, a fence post, as long as you're far enough out, shouldn't be that invasive, hopefully, the root system, but,
yeah, it's just a concern,
oh yeah, I understand. I had to take out a very large pine tree when I put in a well, so I'm aware of that.
And we were-
Anything that's too
Yeah, we took the
disruptive
one
of the
out.
ground.
We removed quite a bit of trees on that
Already.
property too, and
Yeah.
accommodated a lot of neighbors too while we moved in, so
Yeah.
try to do our part to be neighborly.
Yes.
Okay. I guess that's it from me.
Yeah. Alex, I feel bad for you on this situation. Dick, is 6 feet is not legal from a zoning standpoint. Is a 3-foot fence legal?
It's
I
4
think
foot.
4 foot is allowed.
4, you can
And
go
that
up
would
as
be for
high
the
as
front
4.
yard, which is already, yeah. Yes.
And when you're on a corner lot, does it basically work that on both sides, you should be conforming to code with a 4-foot high fence at maximum?
That's what.
I know, I live on Church Street, and very, very few people have fences on Church. There is one I see, but it looks like that doesn't even look 4 feet. It's this white picket fence, about 3 foot high, and stays, maybe because it's smaller, it appears to me that it doesn't really border that sidewalk like your fence does. I just go back, when I look at it, and I'm just giving you a personal view on it. Go ahead, Dick.
To answer your question, reading from the ordinance, non-opaque ornamental fences not exceeding 4 feet in height shall be allowed in the front yard and up to the front building line. And as we discussed at the last meeting, this is a side yard adjacent to the street.
And?
Which is, for the lack of better description, a second front yard.
That's what I'm wondering.
So I personally, as an interpretation, would interpret that 20-foot to be a front yard on the side street. Therefore, any fence within that footage could not exceed 4 feet in height.
Okay.
And it can't be, or it has to be non-opaque. In other words, you can't solidly block it off. You gotta be able to see through it.
So
And could you do that just with the spaces between
Sure.
the posts themselves,
I
the
guess what
boards?
makes it non-opaque is 50% or more of it's open. I mean, because if you're more than 50%, then you're not totally opaque anymore. It's something in between. Now, some ordinances define what that means. Another community I work for, they say that it has to be 40% non-opaque.
All right.
So it actually gives you a criteria for how much has to be open, how much can be closed off.
All right.
But this ordinance just says non-opaque. Well, to me, using that as the definition, non-opaque would be at least 50% is open.
When you look at that fence that Alex has on his house, does that fall under the opaque guidelines as far as
Again,
being
it's
okay?
solidly blocked off. in my-
Before a backyard.
Right,
or-
right, because I was gonna say, no, it doesn't
or
meet
a
the
front
requirement.
yard or
Yeah.
a side yard adjacent to the street, which would be my interpretation.
Which is the
of it.
reason why I called up here twice and asked that question.
Right.
So I don't,
Yeah, because Alex, I personally, I mean, I just try to envision if we had more fences like that up around houses in the village, and I just think it's, from my personal standpoint, it's not a good look. And,
Personally like it.
I understand
You know?
that.
And like, that's the
And
thing
all
is-
my neighbors.
I understand it, but again, and I would yield to you,
Just a
except
minute.
that there is an ordinance.
Question the petitioner. If you want to talk, raise your hand. Be recognized by the chair. You can't just respond to things that are being said by council or by the zoning board or by our building director directly. Do you understand what I'm saying? You have to be recognized first.
So the bottom line, I guess, what it does come down to is you're asking for a variance of an ordinance that is in place. And my feeling is no, I wouldn't grant it. And if it was a situation where I had to grant it, I would step aside and say, okay, I still wouldn't like it. I get what you're saying. But the fact of the matter is you're asking for a variance against that ordinance. And that's the part I'm not going to vote yes on that variance. I think there obviously is a reason for it. And regarding the interesting thing you brought up, Alex, on the Church Street fence, if Dick would have said on that's not in compliance, I would have said the same thing there.
I'm
That
sure
take
you guys
it.
would have,
that-
absolutely. I would hope so personally,
I'm just speaking
too.
for myself personally. I would vote no variance
For
on
sure.
that either.
So
Yeah.
even if I moved it back 20 feet, I mean, it's still a
Thank
6-foot
you.
fence, that's, bothering some people apparently, so,
Yeah, yeah.
and
So
it's
that's
still
just-
gonna be 6 feet, I need some sort of privacy for my end. That's fair, right? To have privacy.
I suppose.
Okay.
No, I don't know the front yard.
Well, look, in this world, with cell phones and cameras everywhere, I like to have a little bit of
Yeah,
privacy.
even up
at
in the
home.
sky.
Okay.
I understand that, yeah. I understand that.
Are you all set, Pat?
I'm done.
My concern would be, it started off shaky because you just called up here and you had a couple people say, I guess, it's okay to do the fence. But you also mentioned at the last meeting you were here that your builder was whoever put the fence up was very aware of the different types of issues for fencing and things within the village. I guess he's done other work.
Yes.
I think something like that, maybe, because we have an on-staff, we have Bill Dinnan here that's on staff to answer any questions you may have or your builder. We may not expect, or I would not expect you to know the answers to this, but a builder would. And if he was kind of questionable, he had the opportunity to talk and get the exact how it should be. And that didn't happen. So that's an issue kind of for me, in that, Bill's here,
Yeah.
so.
Alex, I'd say one more thing to you also. If I was in your shoes, and it went against me that I'm going to have to move that fence, I'd be after that contractor like a duck on a June bug.
I've already talked to them. I have a
And
good
I would make him.
relationship with
I
him.
would make him pay the
He's not
expense.
going to
on that.
pay. That's not going to work like that because he says he read the compliance. The way he understands the rules is the same way I understand the rules.
Well, he didn't realize. He's the pro, and he didn't read them right.
Yeah, I mean, he does lots of places all over the place, and he
Right.
said a lot
And
of
he's the
other
pro.
ordinances are way more descriptive than this place.
I'd respect his opinion, but I'd still go after him.
Well, he's
Mark.
going to do the work.
Mark.
It's just going to cost.
Are you
me
all
money.
set, or did you have more?
I'm all set.
Are you sure?
Sorry. I mean, sorry.
I kind of just had a couple of thoughts, and there might be a question for you as well. I don't want to, say thoughts without a question, but I think from what I'm hearing, there is gray areas with what type of lot, when you have a corner lot. I know some people think it's a prime space to have, and it's great you have that corner lot. Sounds like it may not be. But to me, if all of your neighbors are allowed to have that 6-foot fence in their backyard and you're not, is that fair? I don't know. Should we review that, revise that? I don't know. The contractor, you said, contacted the office? We can't verify
I don't know
whether
if
he
he
did or didn't.
contacted. I can verify that I called the
Okay,
office
you did,
twice.
I'm sorry.
I know
But
that I
we
did
can or
personally.
can't, we can't verify that either way. So, that's not something we can prove or disprove.
Sure, I
So
can- I
that
have
doesn't
full
really
records.
help us. Also, there isn't a permit necessary. So there was nothing that you could have done, I feel, more, because we did not have a permit. So I'm just, reading out thoughts with that. I know Pat had said about having, if we had those fences all over like that. I feel we do, but they're in everybody's backyard, and your backyard's in a different space. But we do have a lot of people with 6 feet backyard, full wood. So with that said, I don't see it as any different. Again, I know you're on a corner, but if it is your backyard and your house was turned just like everybody else's, we wouldn't be here right now. So for me, I think it's important to remember that it is your backyard, even though ordinance-wise, it may be something different legally. And my other thought was, that's what I was going to say. And everybody, it's okay for other people to have that rear fence versus you. So I know we've all kind of had a chance to share our opinion without discussing it yet, and we'll get a chance to discuss it. But to me, those were, I think, the main factors for me in consideration. There's a lot of gray area here. We've kind of questioned it and tried to figure out what to do. We've sent it to Planning Commission, who basically said, we are referring to deferring to Bill because we're not quite sure how to read it, because there's a couple different issues in flow, maybe I can say, and then they sent it back to us. So here we are again. That's what my opinion is. So here we are. So.
No, when you mentioned about the phone calls and all that, I thought the last time it was validated that he did call a couple times.
Well, I can't tell you that I spoke to him, but
Okay.
we do take phone calls from people. We do tell them, you do not need a permit to erect a fence. We tell people you just have to adhere to the ordinance. Again, our ordinance is not clear.
Right, and that's why the first time I sided with them, only for the fact that, Bill had also mentioned there's a lot of gray area. And, so because he was the first to admit that we need to tune it up and everything, so that's where I stood the last time, and that's where I still stand this time, because we have too much of a gray area there. I think if we're not going to move forward saying that we have to have any type of permit, I say we at least need to have some sort of a qualification, verification kind of thing, with anybody who wants to build a fence in the future, you know what I mean? Any type of fence. I think that they need to at least, go through the system to, double check to make sure that they don't have the same type of situation, because, I mean, I don't recall this coming up in the past, you know what I mean? So it's not like, this has been out there many times over, the same type of reoccurrences and all that, right? So.
And unfortunately, this is what it takes for us to realize there may or may not be this gray area that needs to be addressed. Is there an ordinance? Does it make sense to Bill? Absolutely. Does it necessarily make sense to us? I don't know. We have to pick it apart, and would that mean it makes sense to you? Obviously not. You didn't do it intentionally. So, I think we have to take that into context.
No matter what we do decide as a council, I would like to see the gates flipped the other way if somehow it passes and before it and all that, I think that's a reasonable expectation.
You would need to make that part of your motion if you did.
Okay.
And I would stand by with what I said at the last meeting as well, that because it is so close, if it's the consent of council to have you leave it there, that we have some type of liability waiver, if you will, just to make sure that.
Hold harmless.
A hold harmless agreement, just to be sure that kid walking, riding their bike or something, just so if we allow that we're not gonna, be responsible because of a snow plow or,
Can I
spray
ask a
paint it.
question on that, too?
Something to that effect, I guess.
No, that's absolutely no problem. Do you make the other people that have their fences on the same, their fence right there in the background, the white one is on the same line as mine. Are they signing the same contract?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But
I
you're
don't have a
here.
problem
You're
with that.
here.
I'm just asking that
with-
question.
With the zoning board of appeals, and the zoning board of appeals looks at every case separately.
Sure.
There's no precedent for what they've done or not
I
done with
will absolutely
anybody in
sign
the
a
future.
contract, no problem.
And again, when that was erected versus, who was on ZBA and all the different factors do come into play, but I guess that would just be one of the concerns that I have, because it is there, just to be sure that, if a board warps and it sticks out, that's some, that's all I would be
No problem.
concerned about.
Yeah. I can add a little bit. In situations like that, I don't know if that was a particular fence, but I remember there was a fence like that was erected by the homeowner, and then it was called into question, and there was a dispute on that, because I was on council back in the 90s too, and we had issues in some cases with fences, people putting up fences back then. Unfortunately, what happened a lot in the past history of the community is people would just do what they want, and then they'd be told, oh, that's not in compliance, and they say, well, are you gonna make me tear it down? And, and then they'd put in the variance, and it would just could say, well, we can't make them tear it down, and we just get, the variance would be approved. So a lot of times variances were put in after the fact of people doing things. I never agreed with that process, but that may be explained to a certain degree why some things are the way they are and not in compliance with the ordinances. And, you know, it's unfortunate, but that is what used to happen in our community here.
All right, so did any of us have any questions for them before we move on to our decision?
Well, I was just
As
going to
we-
make one more comment about the fact that I understand it's your backyard, but for everybody else on that street, that is in alignment with their front yard. And so that's where I can kind of agree and side with Bill's interpretation that the side yard, when it's on a street like that, where you have all the rest remaining properties, it's their front yard, that there has to be a special consideration taken for that situation.
Yep, and we've also had people with letters, and people came in, my, like, general neighbors too, they were right there without an issue, so.
That's it.
Okay.
Do any of us have anything else they'd like to share, talk about, discuss? Would we like to discuss before we make a decision? Would we like to hash out a decision, what we'd like to do?
Well, this is time for us to discuss amongst ourselves. Again, my opinion was I actually supported them only for the fact of the confusion in the past, but moving forward, we need to make some modifications to how things are handled, all right? But because of the gray area that's involved, I mean, that's why I supported them.
I also made a comment at the last meeting too, that actually I was surprised that we didn't request a permit for fences. We request permits for many other things, why not a fence? So I would suggest that regardless of what the council decides in this case, I think we need to proceed with getting something in writing that we require permits for fences, so that we don't run across this again, regardless of what way the council decides.
Larry, anything else from you?
Well, I do still have concern with being that close. If it was modified in some way to make it compliant with a fence for a front yard, I would be okay with that. And of course, then there'd be no need for the variance other than potentially the gate opening outward. So I don't know what sort of possibility that would be, or whether the homeowners would consider.
Well, as Bill just discussed, it would have to be
No
4-foot
more than
fence,
4
and
foot,
it would
they
have to,
could
you
take
could see
out
through it, right?
Alternating boards in order to create that.
But the zoning,
Advertising has been for a fence 6 foot tall in that area. Since the advertisement was for that, you can grant a variance for something less than that. You just could not grant a variance for something greater than that. So the space between where it is and the space, that space up to or where it could be allowed at the 20 foot is area that you could authorize it to be put anywhere within
1
that
foot
20
back,
feet.
2 foot back, 5 foot
Yes.
back, et cetera.
You don't, it's not an all or nothing deal at this point, because I've advertised, or it's been advertised, for the maximum variance allowable. So anything less than that is within your purview to approve.
If there's, I understand the consideration about the cost of moving that. Is there anything that the village could do, like potentially in-kind service, have DPW help with some of the labor or anything like that to help offset some of that cost?
I wouldn't want them responsible for that
Yeah.
legally,
I wouldn't either.
touching and labor, and
Okay.
if one of our guys got hurt or
Yep.
Yeah, I
their
don't think
property
that's a
was
wise
broken.
idea
And then
at
if
all.
we had allowed that to happen, where do we stop and start and
Yeah,
everything for
no.
things in the future? I understand where you're coming from on that, Larry, you know, kind-heartedness and all that, but, you know, liabilities then, I feel, come into play.
Yeah, that's.
And that's why I think with me, is we can't verify that we didn't misunderstand or steer him wrong with his request when he first called, but we can't fix it per se.
Well, the fact that, the fact that it was a contract fence, I do agree the contractor has that responsibility to ensure that the ordinances are met. That's what the contractor's hired to do is, hey, I want to fence built, and you don't hire somebody, and then after the fact, find out that it wasn't done right, and then, well, too bad you're stuck with it. That, to me, just isn't right.
Do we have the contractor's information just for future reference if we run into other issues?
But the contractor didn't call, he called.
Right.
So that's, I mean,
understand.
that's,
But because of the fact that the contractor, doesn't sound like the contractor did do his due diligence and all that. I just looking at any future situations that might arise, and if we have to deal with something that involves the same contractor, you know what I mean?
If I can respond, since we don't permit it, we don't get that information, and
Okay.
that's strictly private information
Okay.
between the owner and the person they
Right.
A plan review process or a permitting process, we would make sure that that information is included in whatever information we would deal with. But that's,
Yeah.
that won't fix
Yeah,
it.
so for the future, that would be a good idea, some kind
But
of
I'm
a
taking in
review
all this
process.
future
yeah.
information, and as you're aware, you've approved us to review this whole ordinance to make it more clear for everybody
Yep.
in many different areas, not just fences.
Pat, did you have any final
No,
thoughts?
I'm all set.
Mark?
Depending on what the council decides, is there any compromise on your side to, let's just say they decided to keep it as is, but maybe you lowered?
My problem is my dog can jump over a 4-foot fence. So whatever you guys tell me to do, I'm moving it where I'm moving it. If I have to move it 20 feet back, I'm moving it 20 feet back. I'm probably gonna end up, fighting all the way, but I'm gonna move it 20 feet back if I have to. Now,
Yes.
We
Thank you.
can't move it 20 feet. It's too far back. So it has, I mean, if we can recommend it's just the tree is right there. It's 20 feet, so it would be.
we have
at the
two
tree.
we have 2 trees, and then our well are right there between where the fence is and then 20-foot mark. So, we have a few feet in on the fence, on the sidewalk line if we needed to.
But this, one thing that the council needs to understand, the zoning board needs to understand, as well as the petitioners, is this is not a negotiation. This is not a, what will you do, what can we do, how can we compromise with all this? They have made a request for a variance from the standards of the ordinance that say this is what you do. Could the board decide that they want to allow something different than that? Yes. But the fact that, as the petitioner is saying, no, we we won't move back 20 feet, well, the option is the fence comes down and doesn't re-exist again. It's not, if they're not allowed to do it, they're not allowed to do it. They'd have to make a decision as to whether or not they wanted to move with what you allow. What has been said is that if you can allow something less, so if you said, well, our biggest concern is it's too close to the sidewalk, we want it back 6 feet from where it is now, and that's where we want the location to be. You could grant the variance for that amount. He then has to decide whether or not he's going to deal with it in that respect. What he knows is he can't have it where it is now. So you either say to him, yes, we're going to allow it, and we're going to allow it because we think X of why that's true. But, the zoning board allows variances on the basis of, when we're talking about setback and those items, practical difficulties. You have to find that there is a practical difficulty that they didn't create, that's peculiar to the property, that means that they can't meet the standards of the ordinance. You have to evaluate, can they meet the standards of the ordinance? Now, there's a tree that's in the way, tree can be taken out if it has to be taken out. I'm not saying that you should say that to them or that they may want to do it, but it's not yours to decide whether or not this is going to be palatable to them. You're like a judge and jury. You have to listen to the facts. He and she have to make their case to you and say, here's why you should allow us to violate your ordinance and your requirements. You say, does he meet the standards? If he meets the standards, grant it to him. If he doesn't, don't.
Thank you. That clarifies for me a lot.
So that's actually statutory.
And
That is
that's where we're-
straight out of the state law referencing the Zoning Enabling Act. That's rules for grant the variance. I mean, Dale was real clear and very succinct.
Yeah. Well, it's good
But
for
I think
all of us
sometimes
to
we
have heard
forget
that at the same time.
those portions of it, you know, and it's not whether you've done a good job in constructing it, whether, you know, you have done the best you could do under the circumstances. None of those things really matter to what's before the board right now. And they have to decide, is this appropriate? And the fact that somebody else got to do it somewhere else a different way doesn't help you either. So, you know, just the board needs to think of it this way. You look at it and you say, does this meet the standards for giving a variance to allow it to stay? And then make your decision.
I'm good over here, Tanya.
Are you
by
good
the
over
way.
there? All right. Any last words before we come to a consensus on what we're doing? All right. So, we have to decide to grant the appeal or not, based on the request given. If we do, there can be, Colleen mentioned possibly a hold harmless, and Larry mentioned possibly a change in height. That's what's on the table. Oh, and the gate opening the opposite direction. Anything else? Sorry to get the gate right down.
I move to approve the variance with a hold harmless
Point
agreement.
of interest, just, and I don't mean to disrupt, but there is a procedure to follow to this. One of the procedures is that before you make a decision, you have to come up with what's called findings of fact.
We
So
did that at the
Can we just
last one.
utilize the
You
same
might
ones?
want to repeat those.
Okay, and read them
before
out?
you Proceed on with this.
Does it say
Or you
under?
could simply
Reference.
indicate,
Reference it.
reference the
For the record.
findings of fact that were previously established stand.
Very good. Either way, I think it's imperative that you incorporate that before your motion.
Okay. So, we will read down the list of finding of fact from the August 26, 2019.
That's the complete list. It starts at the bottom.
Okay. Meeting, and we would like to include that into the minutes of this evening's meeting. The setback requirement of the yard is different for street side yard. No permit needed to erect a fence. Fence as erected is in violation of the ordinance. Ordinances are not clear about street side yards. Property line is close to the edge of the sidewalk. Well is approximately 15 feet back from the property line. The fence was constructed by a contractor. The property is currently zoned R2. Sidewalk maintenance and liability for the DPW are a concern. No concerns are expressed from public input of those that were available that evening. I'm sorry, were participating that evening. Estimate to move the fence 3 to 4. Your estimate to move the fence is 3,000 to 4,000 per the homeowner. Homeowner made 2 calls to the village office. There's a concern of public safety with the fence where it's located. And there's a concern of future concrete sidewalk construction.
And I would like to add one more finding of fact. The existing gate opens out over the sidewalk,
All right.
since that was brought up at this meeting.
And I would also like to add one more. I did speak with Bob Huxwell from DPW, and I asked him if he had any concerns as far as snow removal. He said he did not.
All right. So incorporating the finding of facts from August 22nd, in additional, the gate opens outward, and DPW does not see at this time a concern with snow removal.
I would suggest that you re-motion that and get approval for that then first.
For-
Because it was amended.
For adding the 2.
Right.
Mhm.
So I don't know who made the original motion for that, but
The original
anybody
motion?
else could amend it.
Larry and
It
Mark
doesn't-
Robinson.
It doesn't really matter who made it the first time.
Right.
You just get a motion second and vote on the findings of fact, and I think we'll be in good
Okay.
order then.
I move to approve the findings of fact as amended.
Okay, yep.
Support.
Oh, whoops, I'm sorry. Motion by Councilman Skornica, supported by Councilman Robinson, to approve the finding of fact on these, what, Board of Appeals application for the variance 19002. Yes, amended, thank you. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Two.
This
Two.
is for the findings of fact.
Yeah.
Oh, for the
Findings
findings
of
of
fact.
fact.
Just a finding of facts.
Oh, then I approve.
I approve it.
I'm sorry, do we want to read the motion?
Yeah.
So we know what we're,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh,
The motion was to approve the findings of fact as amended. Is that correct?
That's correct.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Sorry about that. All right. Now, Kelly, were you going to make a motion? Would you pass it?
Third time's a charm, right? I move to approve the variance with a hold harmless agreement with the village and the resident.
And for the gate?
For me, the
Oh,
gate.
I see.
mean, for me, the gate doesn't really make that big of a deal, but if somebody wants to amend it, I mean, that's,
Okay, so,
my motion's
You
gonna
have to
be.
have a support before you can amend.
Yeah,
And you have to have support before you can discuss.
Yes.
support.
now we can discuss it.
Okay.
All right.
And now you can make
Motion
your
by
amendment.
Councilman Skornica, supported by Councilman Robinson, to approve the variance with a hold harmless agreement. Any further questions, comments, discussion?
Well, I think that we need to also include a couple of the other items that have been discussed as well. And that would be the change in the direction that the gate opens. And there was also, I think that was the only other thing. You already got the hold harmless, all right?
So how would you like to amend that motion?
So I'd like to make a, oh boy.
Amend. Just
Yeah,
amend.
I'd like to make an amendment to also include the direction that the gate swings open to the opposite direction.
All right. Anybody else? Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas?
Do we need a
You
support?
have to have support for
Oh,
the motion
I'm sorry,
before.
you're right.
And the chair really isn't
Robinson.
supposed to ask for the second. If the second doesn't occur, then the amendment will die.
All right. Motion by Councilman Robinson, do we have a support? I can support that.
Okay.
Any further questions, comments, discussions on the motion? Liz, would you like to read that for us?
Yes, the motion is to approve the variance with a hold harmless agreement between the homeowner and the village, and also with the exception of moving the gate to swing inwards. I'll make it prettier in the minutes.
All right, and can we have a roll call vote on that,
Well, it's gotta
please?
be specifically what the motion was, it can't be changed, it's gotta be exactly how it was worded. Do you know what I mean? No, I'm
I
just
think
saying, it's
that's
gotta,
fine,
we
Liz.
can't change it for the minutes, it's gotta be exactly how it was
I think they're ready,
presented.
the way you're at it, Liz, was fine.
Mark, is that, are you comfortable with that?
I was comfortable with
That's
that.
your- that's your
Yeah.
motion. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Batsu,
No.
George,
No.
Hayden,
No?
Robinson,
Yes.
Skornica,
Yes.
Rice.
Yes. Motion is 3-3, does not carry. We thank you very much.
So what does that mean?
Would you mind telling them what the options are? So I am
Well,
correct.
the other option is to go the other direction, but I still think you're gonna be in the middle, so,
Right.
it's quite clear how this has gone down, so at this point in time, there is not an approval, but there is not a denial. So,
So there should be a motion. If you're not going to approve it, there should be a motion to deny it. And if that fails again, then you're at
I
a
think if
standstill.
that fails again, I think you need to table this till you have all your members present.
Yep.
Because when you have a split board, ties don't get it.
Right.
Right.
Okay, you have to have that seventh member to be able to break the tie. So, as Dale said, you have to have a motion that passes.
Right.
Okay, the one to approve didn't because of the tie. I'm pretty sure one to deny it tonight is gonna be a tie.
But he can't guess that.
Yeah.
But I can't guess that.
And the board could also have a different motion to approve
Right. With a
if
different
someone
clearance.
wanted some different
Change.
standards in there.
Right.
The motion that was made, on how it was made has failed, so that's done.
I would like to make a motion to table until we have a full board at our
Support.
January meeting.
Support.
Motion by Councilman Bryce, supported by Councilman George. Any further questions, comments, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0 to table till January meeting with a full board. Hopefully.
One down, still.
No, yeah.
All right.
I would just say to the petitioner, if that date is a problem for you for travel or whatever, you need to let us know as soon as possible.
I'll find out. I gotta leave.
January 20.
It's the third
Monday?
third Monday.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the holiday, the
Well,
third
zone-
Monday.
And having the meeting tonight was an error. It was supposed to have been scheduled for tomorrow night, but it was published in the paper for tonight. So I think it was the consensus to have a separate day for a zoning board meeting.
Yes, that's.
Okay. So the
Okay,
January
we'd have
date's
to
to be
let you know what it
decided.
was then, for January.
Right.
But we will let you know, and as we did before, if that's a
could get a
problem for
couple
you,
dates
we
from
can
them.
adjust it, but
And-
you're likely going another 30 days.
Yeah, I understand.
So, I was gonna say, we can probably get a couple dates from you and see what meshes with our schedule and try
My
to,
problem is I'm only in town on weekends, and
Yeah.
I travel out of town Sunday night, and I get back in town Monday,
really
so
gonna need to
I
be here
work
again?
around your guys' schedule. And when I talked with you, I arranged for last month, and I was here, and then something happened to be here, so I even lost money to be here too. My wages are being affected by being in these.
Well, and you don't have to be here, you know.
I understand that, but it's my property, and I want to
want-
keep it
Yeah,
for these
all
things,
right.
so. But thank you very much, all right.
well, we do appreciate you coming, and we hope to continue to come to a conclusion. I'm sorry. Next up, item number 7 is our new business, and A is appeal number 19-003, and that will be 173 North Church Street. I'd invite you to please step on up and share with us. You'll share the comments that you have, and then we can respond with some questions, and we can come to a board decision.
You better hurry.
I can just interject for 1 second. The appeal here was advertised for a variance of 9 square feet per side and a 1 foot in height. At this point in time, the application indicates that it meets the height requirement according to ordinance, therefore you won't need to address the height issue. But
Thank
the
you.
square footage, or the size still remains.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Mark Johnson with MRJ Sign Company. I'm actually a business owner in the village. I'm the building at the end of Narren Street on the right across from the village property. The church has been in existence within the community since 1848, but the building itself has been there since the 60s. And I believe that that actually predates the zoning ordinance and or if not the zoning ordinance itself, the idea of a special use. So the church that has been there for all these years doesn't have a special use to be a church on that residential property. If it were, it would be allowed a different amount of square footage than what it is. What we are looking at doing is taking the existing sign that was done about 20 years ago. It was a redwood type of sign that has deteriorated, that has since been covered up with like a banner type material temporarily with the new logo, and doing a whole new sign, same size, same setback from the sidewalk, If you're familiar with First Impressions Hair Salon at the corner of Narren and Mill, that's one of mine, along with Marsh for that matter, and a lot of other things around town. But it's the exact same type of construction. It's an aluminum face with vinyl graphics, supported by cedar posts with PVC covers, so that therefore you do it once, lasts forever. Okay. And in essence, the practical difficulty is that I believe the church and its location there actually predates the idea of the special use. And all we're doing is replacing what is there with something the exact same size that'll look nicer, and they won't have to worry about maintaining. And I'm obviously here for any other questions or input.
So you said the current sign is about,
Hold on. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share with us before we were able to ask questions? And all right, if you don't mind, Mark, can we start down with you and work our way?
Yeah, there'll be something else coming, but I looked at a couple of signs in the village over the weekend. So the total sign you're looking for is 15 square feet?
No, the total sign is 24 square feet.
24, okay.
Which is the same size that the sign is now.
Okay, I got you.
I believe that the 15 square feet, and Bill can correct me if I'm wrong.
Goes on to the 9 square foot that our
Right,
ordinance.
no,
Okay.
the 15 square feet is probably more in line since your ordinance doesn't talk about church uses as most ordinances do. I would think that the 15 square feet would be like a home-based business. I'm a locksmith and I work out of my house, and I have a use approval there. I have something smaller because it's just for people, to find me. Whereas, and of course, this is not only for the congregation, but more importantly, there's weddings, funerals, there's different things that happen that people that are not necessarily members of the congregation, but could be grandparents or whatever, are trying to locate the church. And that really goes to the need of a sign more in the size of what we're asking for.
So at 25 miles an hour going down that street.
Yeah, it's pretty hard when you get down, because if you think of 15 square feet, you're talking, 4 by, you're not talking, you're talking less than 2 of these ceiling
Well,
tiles.
isn't 15 square feet the same size as the Methodist church?
actually, it's actually 9 is what's allowed, and they need
9.
15 additional
Yeah.
to make
Right.
the 24 foot.
Right, 9 is what would be allowed.
All right.
That's not very big, 3 by 3.
You all set, Mark?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
No, I'm fine with it on that variance. I'm okay with it.
Just, you mentioned that the current sign has been there about 20 years. And you made a statement that you would think that this predates zoning. Well, I can say that I'm pretty positive, because I was on council back in the 90s, we had zoning boards of appeals back then, that we had existing ordinances in place for signage.
No,
back
I'm not
then.
saying that the current sign predates the zoning ordinance. I'm saying the lack of a special use permit. If a church were to go into a residential neighborhood now, your ordinance would probably require them to come and get a special use. What I'm saying is the existence of that church on that property.
The use is grandfathered in, but I'm just.
Well, I'm not
trying-
asking, I'm not stating that the sign is.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify that.
Because it's
you know,
being replaced, right.
regardless of the use, whether the use was required a variance, a special permit or not, the sign itself, we would have had existing zoning ordinances in places when that sign was erected 20 years ago that should have been followed.
Well, a permit
and I
was
would-
issued for the existing sign.
Oh, there was a permit issued for it, okay.
Yes, it was provided to me by the village. Liz provided
Oh,
to.
okay, I did not see that in our packet.
I think the issue is Bill's thorough, so
Yeah.
it would be one, I was really shocked when I read that 5 feet and a foot variance, so I'm like, he's slipping. I even said to Liz, we're all getting old, at least older. Yeah, I mean, there was a permit issued for the existing sign.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, and all we're asking for, I like being upfront, okay, obviously. If I were rebuilding the existing, that would be one thing, but it's not worth rebuilding. I want to do something for them that they can pay for at once and spend their
Yeah,
dollars
I guess
elsewhere
when I
down
was
the
looking
line.
through the material we had, I did not see.
There is, if I may,
Yeah.
we do have from 1998 an application for a sign permit for a sign that is at 21 square feet.
Okay, so we had, the permit was approved for 21.
Well, I don't know if this is that permit. I think there may have been one after.
I think that's the most recent one.
Is this the most recent?
Well, the sign was changed without a permit someplace between that one and.
In this one, yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
But
I think that when I researched the file, I think that's more what I found.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, because there should be something in the file that shows that it was changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, the file silent.
I wonder what happened there.
Are you all set, Larry?
Um,
Or- Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my only concern is, I just wanted to clarify whether, it seems that there was a permit issued in the past, so that's good to know. For me, that would be the basis for how I would be viewing this particular request. You probably heard during the last time, my concern is that people often in this community in the past have done something, and then when it was called out that it wasn't in compliance, they put in for variances after the fact. And I don't think that's a good practice, but we do have a valid permit, so that's probably going to weigh a lot from me in my thinking on.
yeah, because
Can we see that permit?
we haven't done anything. We're not putting up something
Yeah.
and then asking for permission.
Well, I mean, I know that sign obviously must have changed a few times because there's a picture right on the website for the church that shows a different sign that's dated 2015.
Well, as I
so-
said, what's over the existing sign is a banner.
Yep.
And that sign is.
So the frame is
from-
there, they've changed
Yeah,
the
well, what they did
vinyl
was they
overlay
like
on the
framed it
walls.
out. They went over the old redwoods.
Yeah.
You know, the redwood lasts, but the paint finish doesn't. Like any lap siding on a house or anything else, you paint it, you have to repaint it,
Yeah.
a deck or anything else, and that's what becomes a maintenance issue.
Yes.
Okay, I guess that's it. for
Mark,
me.
if you don't mind, I'll skip over and come back to Dan.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just.
No, if you don't mind, if you have questions or any
Oh.
comments or anything, we'll
Um,
circle around.
Is it my turn, or,
Please.
okay, I'm sorry. I
Dan,
just
no.
want to reiterate to Dan that Bill earlier said that the height was in compliance, so we're mainly talking about the width, the length of it, so.
It's a difference of, different.
Right, and you have in your hand an approval from 98 saying that, and that's the exact same size as it
Was
was
it
in 98?
seven
Oh,
foot versus 8 foot?
Yeah, it's the same thing, it's just framed out. I don't know if they built it longer than what they got the permit for. I was their
Oh, that's the
contractor.
square, foot, but the
But
length, the
I
length.
patterned the request, and the main reason, the initial reason why we're here is because you're allowed considerably less square footage because there, again, there's no use permit.
Special use.
Special use.
Anything else, Mark?
No.
Colleen?
No questions.
Dan?
I'm just looking at, and I apologize, number one, to everybody that I'm late, but I'm just looking at the visual, all right? And it looks like like the side margins of this sign here down below look considerably larger than the actual margin, so it looks like you're expanding the margin on the sign. Is that?
What do you mean by the margin, the distance
The
from the?
distance between the end and
White space.
your first orange logo, or green logo, excuse me, and then the distance between the letter E in Hillside and the end
Scaling of
appears to
lenses.
be much
No, it's
greater.
actually about the same. He may not have proportioned the photo, because that's just photoshopped. But I physically measured the sign, and the sign's a 3x8. And that's what we're asking for.
No, you couldn't.
We are asking for a foot additional in height, just so that it's not, you know, a little bit higher off the ground for snow and things. But at 5 feet, we're still within, we meet the ordinance and the
I think what
requirement.
with the Photoshop, I think you referenced, I don't think this was Photoshopped because it's still the white space between the border and then the logo, the three-cross logo, and then the E, that white space. Is that what you were referring to, Dan?
Yes.
So I don't think, this might have been like cropped differently, but
Right.
this here could not have been Photoshopped because the.
Okay,
just
I
the
understand what
back-
you're saying now.
Yeah, that was
I understand
just
your
a-
question.
the
But
banner
what you
that
have to
pulled it
realize
out.
is, it's hard to see, but these are the end posts. So as you see, it's the same size from post to post. What they have is a banner that goes all the way and
all the way
wraps
across.
around the post.
Right, I see that, right. mhm.
Okay,
They-
so
yeah,
it's
this
still
goes to
the same.
The complete, the entire post is covered, where this stops right at the
Right.
first corner of the post.
Right, and the posts are vinyl clad with the top, vinyl top, decorative types.
All right, did you have anything else for us?
No.
Okay.
No. I
All
thought
right,
there
so,
would be.
Yeah.
our job is to continue with our finding of facts.
Just-
And if we can go ahead and start sharing what those are.
Wait a
Can I
minute.
ask one more question? Based upon what they were, what was stated then, the current sign, including the post, fits within the 8-foot, but the.
No, the current sign fits, if you look at the dimension, the current sign has 8 foot long, and then it has posts on each end. The posts are just covered with the vinyl banner. It's this.
So if
I'm
you
literally-
pulled off the
I'm
vinyl
literally
banner-
gonna be able to
okay.
take the existing sign, pull out the posts with my boom, my crane truck,
Okay.
and be able to slide the new ones back in the same holes.
Okay, so actually, the current sign is more than 8 foot if you consider
Right,
from vinyl
yeah, it's
edge
like
to
8,
vinyl
9 or
edge.
something like that, but I didn't calculate
Okay.
it that way because I knew that the
And the proposed
posts
sign
weren't.
would be 8 foot within between post to post,
Right.
but then you add the post, it's gonna be closer to 9 foot wide.
Yeah, a little bit under that.
Is it gonna be
It's like a
between the
5-inch
posts
post, I
or
think.
at the end of the.
Between them.
So
In-
it sort
That's
of
what
goes
the show-
The
between.
8 foot is measured from
between
inner
the
edge to
nine.
inner edge according to this, it looks
What the
like.
request is to go from a 9 square foot variance to a 23 square foot. That's what our question is, not how wide,
24.
not how long, 24?
Excuse
3
me.
by 8.
Excuse me.
Not how,
24.
24, not how wide, how long, it's necessarily what it is. With the variance, the issue is the 9 square feet. That's what the request is. So we need to focus on the request of the change between the 9 square feet and the 24
Can we
square feet.
ask questions of our building inspector?
If I
How
may.
would you, how would,
You kind of said that backwards. Actually, the request is for 15 square feet.
Additional.
Because what,
To
right,
go to
because
the
what is
24,
allowed
correct.
is 9 square feet, or about the size of one of these ceiling tiles. That's what's allowed.
So our total would go
Which,
from
like
9
I
to
said, is
24
for like
with a 15 square foot
home-based
difference.
business, not
I have
a
a-
church or
pass that
fire
back down to Liz if
department
you guys
or
are
any
done.
other.
I have a question for Bill. When we are considering the overall size of a sign, how do the posts fit into the size within the ordinance?
Because of the way he's designed the sign with the border around it, the border becomes the outside edges of the computable area. The
So
posts
does-
are outside of that.
Okay, so the post would not be counted the way that this new sign is shown as.
That would be my interpretation of the ordinance, yes.
Okay.
The support, the posts are just merely a support mechanism, they're not part of the
Display,
advertisement
okay.
portion. So,
Got
since
it.
he put a border around that, which it currently doesn't have a border on it, he put a border around it, therefore, my interpretation of that would be is that border would now be the exterior perimeter of the advertising portion of the sign.
Okay.
That's typically the way most ordinances refer to that, is that if you don't have a border, it's typically the outer edges of the script or any other part of the sign that has either art form or whatever, so the 3 crosses and then the hillside.
Yeah,
you
like
know, you
channel
go
letters.
outside edges of that, but since you put a border, that's your maximum area. That's what I computed it from.
Thank you. All right, so next up, we will have the public hearing to hear public comments on Appeal 19-003. If anybody would like to step up to the podium and they had any input at all on the sign variance to change from 9 square feet to 24 square feet. Now is your chance to step up. Anybody?
But just to clarify, 9 square feet as it relates to the ordinance, it's a difference between 21 square feet in the current versus what they're requesting now to be 24 for a difference of 3 square foot.
No, that's not true. If I can quickly clarify this.
The public hearing is now closed. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
Nobody else
We're good.
offered to speak. The issue here is, as was mentioned earlier, churches are allowed in every zoning district. Only 2 of your zoning districts allow churches pursuant to just a permitted use. That's just, you can do it on that property. All the other uses that churches are allowed in are all special land use approvals. That's where this church falls in, but since the church itself wasn't, their use on the property was a church back to the 1890s or whatever it was, it predates the ordinance, therefore is what we call an existing non-conforming use. Now, what I researched back in the records, I found nowhere along that process they didn't or weren't required to get a special use, but that's typically when signs get addressed on properties where the use doesn't conform with the permitted use, churches on residential zones. So if they had gotten a special use permit, the signs would have been addressed at that time. That didn't happen by virtue of it didn't need to happen. However, the signs still are required to meet the ordinance requirements. So I went back to see if there was a previous special use. I went back to the files to see if there was a previous zoning board issue. I did find permits for signs that probably shouldn't have been issued. And that last permit didn't match the sign that's there today. All that being done, I went back to the ordinance and said, what they want is a sign. And from my perspective, to put up a sign, a replacement under most ordinances is still a new sign. Replacement or not, unless the ordinance specifically states you can replace a panel. So I treated this as it's going to be a brand new sign. And that's where we're at tonight. Churches typically, in most ordinances, get lost in the ordinances because they are a use on almost every piece of land for different special uses, but they get caught in a trap because churches themselves typically aren't addressed in ordinances for their signs. So this happens a lot. I was explaining to Tanya earlier this evening, I had to go to the zoning board in a different community for my own church because they didn't allow that sign. I had to go explain to them.
Did you get the variance?
I had to go explain to them how there's kind of a hole in most everybody's ordinance relative to churches. So I hope that helps clarify that a little bit for you.
Thank you. All right, so now's our time to gather our findings of fact on appeal number 19-003. And if anybody wants to go ahead and throw things out, we'll get the list going.
So-
Oh, go ahead, just a second. I know Dan mentioned the ordinance, the 1998 ordinance. Did you want to put that on there?
I wanted to put what?
Did you want to put the 1998 ordinance?
The
you
permit,
mentioned?
you mean, or the?
Right, did you want to add, did you want to add that as?
Sure.
Go ahead.
As a finding of fact.
Right, we have the
Okay, yeah.
1998 signed application for 21 feet. That is the last application we have on record. How's that?
Sounds good.
I'd also like to bring up for finding a fact that he did mention that basically if you pulled that outer vinyl covering, you're basically replacing it with the exact same size, post in the same holes and all that, correct?
Right.
So that's another.
I'm
finding of
hoping
fact.
that I can pull the posts right out and put the new ones in, and that frost hasn't set in. Veterans Day gave me a loop, the snow.
All right, what else? It is currently zoned R2 with no special use on file.
with an existing non-conforming use on the property.
Existing non-conforming, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I just have this on your appeal, or on the permit says that the existing sign is 4 feet from the top of the sign to the grade, and the replacement is 5 feet from the top to the grade.
Correct.
So it's not really the exact same size.
But
Not the
5
exact
feet
same
is
height,
allowed.
Same size.
But,
The height is.
It's the same square footage.
okay, so.
Overall height doesn't reference size in sign ordinances.
Okay.
That's the maximum height. from
Bill
the top
did
of
say
sign.
earlier that the height was not
Correct.
an issue.
Okay.
The maximum of 5 feet.
Right.
And that does fall in that 5 feet.
Okay.
And we caught that in the ordinance. If not, I would have proposed it at 4 foot. But I realized they were allowed 5 foot and
On our
a
current
little bit of
ordinance.
snow, right.
The current ordinance refers to signs that are in R2, but does not reference the special use, correct?
Correct.
Anything else? Findings to put on record? No? All right. We cover them all?
Would you like me to read them back to you?
Please.
We have a permit issued in 1998 for 21 square feet, replacing existing with exact same size, zoned R2. No special use on file is existing non-conforming, and current ordinance references R2 district but not special use. Is that correct?
All right. Can I entertain a motion to enter those?
I make a motion to accept the findings of fact as stated.
Support.
Questions, comments, discussions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Enter the findings of facts. Next up is our board decision on the appeal number 19-003. All right, and what is your pleasure? Is this something we agree, disagree? Where are we at?
So we need to make a motion at this point to accept the variance.
If you would like to do that, yes.
Approve or
Grant.
deny, whatever your preference,
Grant.
and let the vote fall where it does.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance as presented.
Support.
Motion by Councilman Robinson, supported by Councilman Ashman, to approve the variance as requested. Any further questions, comments, discussion? All right, and can we have a roll call vote, please, Liz?
Eshman,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Hayden,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Yes.
Skornica, Bryce,
Yes.
Butsu.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
sir. And at 7:13, we adjourn.